In September of 2012, thousands of people took to the streets of Chicago during a NATO summit to rally against war, economic greed, climate change, and government corruption. During the protest, one group stood out among the rest. Dressed in all black, their faces covered, identities hidden from both police and photojournalists. So, first off, Black Bloc is not a specific group. It's a tactic used by groups of protesters all over the world. That group was one of the reasons street photographer Ryan Williams went into the heart of the protest that day.
People that are doing Black Bloc tactics always have black bandanas. They always have some kind of face covering. Sometimes they're wearing sunglasses or hats or masks. They always wear black clothes, and they don't have to be anarchists. They don't have to be violent. They're not always intent on destroying property. What they are intent on is preserving their anonymity so that they can directly confront police or authority figures or make bold statements about the particular situation that they're protesting without fear of persecution.
And it turns out they were right to be wary of police.
In the city of Chicago, we've had a lot of revelations over the past several years of police surveillance on ordinary citizens, police using technology to intercept cell phone communications without a warrant, police monitoring texts and chats and other private communications.
This particular protest started out organized and permitted. At the center were Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans who marched to the NATO summit and threw their medals over the police barricade. The whole scene was very reminiscent of the Vietnam War protests of the 60s and 70s. But there seemed to be a shift once that was over.
I think the permit had been approved till, let's say, like 11 a.m. or noon or something like that, and that everybody had to disperse. And nobody dispersed. They all just stood there and refused to leave.
Police stood their ground, ready for anything to happen, and according to Ryan, they were armed with tear gas, rubber bullets, water cannons, and batons. But the protesters in black didn't stand down either, until
all hell broke loose.
Both sides started pushing against each other. Protesters picked up a barricade and threw it at the police. The police made arrests and used their batons against protesters, but still, the protesters refused to step down. But just as fast as it started, it seemed to disappear.
It was lightning fast. They came, they made their statement, they pushed, and then they dispersed.
Protests involving Black Bloc tactics don't always end so peacefully, with many continuing on into vandalism and violence. But every protest is different, as is each individual protester.
Certainly these protesters are real people just like everybody else. There are people's brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and children, and they're people's grandparents and people's teachers, and some of them are police officers themselves.
And that is why Ryan took his camera to the streets that day, to give a face to a faceless movement, and to get a hell of a photo series in the process.
It really felt like a moment when there were a lot of things that had been floating around in people's heads finally coming to the surface, and in a very public, highly visible, very creative, very colorful, and very loud way.
Other protesters recently took to the streets of London to rebel against gentrification. To find out more about that, check out this episode.
The protesters are an anti-gentrification group called the Parade. The group launched their campaign against the store because they felt it symbolized a bigger problem in London and indeed in many other metropolises around the world.
And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.